Hello there, it's me again. In today's video, I want to show you how to make your Vizcom workflows more efficient. I'll go into the details of how many credits are being used for what actions and what is the smartest way to apply these actions in order to finish your project on the lowest number possible in terms of credit use. So if you're curious and want to improve your own workflow, then stay tuned. Recently, Vizcom made the switch to a credit-based system. Before that, you basically had a fixed amount of certain actions. So let's say, I don't know how many it was, but let's say 20 3D modeling actions, 30 animation actions, and so forth, right? But now they switched to the credit system, which means that you have free control over when you want to use your credits and what to use it for. So at the end of the month, it's not like 10 3D modeling generations are still unused because you just didn't need them for your workflow this month, right? So now you have more freedom. In the Pro plan, you have 20,000 credits per month, your settings page, and then the plans and billing. And there, for the credits, it says your current amount of credits left. So I'm at my limit, almost gone, just 108 credits left. And here is a hyperlink that shows you the actual cost for each of the actions that you can do. For animation, it's between 11 and 80 seconds, 80 credits per second, depending on what model you use to animate, right? Background removal, all these things have different costs to them. But also, which is interesting, based on this conversion table, I saw there are features that I don't even know about. I don't know where to find them and how to use them. Like, what does blend lighting mean? Is that mixing up two images together? And if so, where can I find the function? Because I cannot find it either in the workbench or in the direct editing of an image. So I'm curious. Change expression, all right, that's a normal thing, right? Again, 8 credits, for example. Extracting materials has a certain amount. Parts and colors, apparently 0 per item. Seems not to be running on the AI engine. Getting the list of parts apparently is free, but actually rendering them out is not free. So image enhancement works per megapixel. Image upscale, same 1/5 credit per megapixel. Instant renders, magic erase. And then you have 3D. So this is the most cost intensive almost. And it also depends highly on the model you use for your 3D output, right? So you have detailed smooth, high pack, 300 credits, mesh conversion, mix again. I don't know what mix is supposed to be. Then we have the modify, and this I find to be really interesting. It says standard V2, and Pro. The Pro is 30, the standard is 8, and standard V2 16, right? So these are the things that are mostly being used. So this is to me the most relevant one. New view, outpaint again. I'm not sure what outpaint is supposed to mean. Palette training, no clue where to find it. I mean, I do have color palettes here, and I can just add color palettes. But palette training, I'm not really sure about what it is supposed to mean. Then we have a try-on generation, variating form and color, and video upscales, right? So this is the basic cost overview of the whole thing. So for the rest of the video, I will be basically going through my process that I have more or less tested over the last months and weeks, and see if at one point either of the modification models is preferred over the other. So I can do specific steps with, let's say, the least amount of credits possible, while other steps I use another model to efficiently get there, right? So what I did is basically I used this image as my starting model, right? And at the beginning of this whole exercise, I had 1,079 credits left. The next thing that I tested is how much an upscale costs, because it says upscaling is 1/5 per megapixel. I didn't really understand how that would be translated. So I took this image and upscaled it to so this is now 1024 by 1024, and I scaled it up to 2048 by 2048, and it cost me exactly a single credit. Now I go through the process, right? So again, I start here. I have a prompt to let it render my results. This is the result that I get from the standard plan. And also interesting that even though they have in their modify standard V2 and Pro, there is no standard V2 model available to me. I'm not sure if it's just like a heads up already that it will be coming, or that it's a mistake or whatever, but I actually only have Pro and standard mode for the regular modify action, right? So I used the standard one, and this was the result. And if you compare it with the result of the Pro mode, then I would say the Pro mode did a better job with considering all the details that I wrote in the prompt in terms of background, right? Clean, white, seamless background, neutral studio environment, soft diffused lighting from both sides, realistic plastic, So I think overall this feels to me like it did a better job in translating this, but I'm actually also really satisfied with the result from the standard plan. So I just redid it to see if it would be consistent. And this is my second result, so it's very different. So here it was actually preferring the prompt which says wireless in ear earphones. There was a mistake on my side. So that's also interesting, which dominates the image or the text, right? So it just removed the cables and rendered them. Also looks good. I think works, but if I did the same experiment with the Pro mode, here you can see the images. They're almost exactly the same. So that I find interesting. So does that mean that I should use the standard one if I want more variation or not? I'm not sure, but apparently the prompt is being interpreted in a different way for the different modes, right? So that is an insight that I definitely took from this. So then let's say I selected one image of each of these examples outputs, right? And I said, okay, what's the common thing that I usually do then is maybe change some things, apply some graphics. For this example, I just invented a logo quickly and asked it to place that logo on the stem, right? I said even more specifically to the slim outer stem, small clean placement centered on the stem surface, realistic printed branding. So that's the result that I got. So I think it did a good job, even though I think the logo is too big. And I did the same thing just with the standard. And if we compare the results from the standard and the Pro mode, then they look almost identical to me. But again, the cost is completely different. So this one costs 8 and this one 30. So I'm almost basically 3 times as cheap. So I can also do 3 times more tests to see if there's a result that I can work with further before I get to the same cost of using the Pro. The next thing was then I wanted to do some additional changes, which were like changing the color of the silicone ear tips to a teal color that I refer to from my asset library, right? So I have a color saved here, which is teal. So I can just call the name in the prompt and it will understand what I'm looking for. And I basically also wanted it to add a metallic ring encircling the joint where the stem transitions into the larger rounded earbud housing. So it actually applied it to the front. I wanted it here in this section of the stem. So that didn't quite come across. But overall, the way the color was applied, I'm happy with. And also doing it 2 times over, there's just slight variation, but the color is very consistently applied. And I think both of these are quite successful, even though they're not doing what I wanted. So I would have to adjust my prompt in order to actually achieve it or indicate where I want the metal ring to be. And then the same prompt I used with the standard. And then I got this result, but the results are really promising. Same nice appearance, same issue with positioning the metal ring, right? It's not where I wanted it to be, but overall, I feel like this is actually working quite well. And then the next thing is that I wanted it to basically give me a new composition of the thing. Now we have a very sterile static image, and I wanted it to be a little bit more dynamic, more exciting, more different perspectives also. So I asked it to recompose the earphones into new dynamic studio perspective, visually interesting, keeping everything unchanged, and keeping the same white background. So there I did 2 tries. I like this one. It's a little bit more front face showing, and there's a little bit more depth to this whole thing and dynamic, even though the cable thing in the back is obviously not the correct way to represent it, right? They're not just connecting each other. And for the standard plan, same prompt, we get these compositions. I think this one is okay, even though it looks a little bit messy, right? There's a little bit like 2 cables going on, not the best, but let's say if that would be cleaned up in Photoshop even, I think that would be really strong, showing the same piece from 2 completely different perspectives, also much more from the front than the original input, right? I like that a lot. But the second attempt was a fail because it reinvented something completely different. I mean, it maybe even looks cool, but it's deviating from the input that I provided. So that's a little bit a fail. Here then I started to notice that the time it takes is also vastly different. So to render this image, it took 13 seconds. To this one, another 13 seconds. But to render these ones in the Pro mode, it took more than 2 minutes and 25 seconds. And this one almost took 2 minutes as well, right? So if time is an issue for you, then that's definitely also something you should be considering for your process and how to make it more efficient. Now I wanted to do one of the things that you probably saw already out there, creating micro photography of your items. So you get some details, some really nice selling shots. So I also asked ChatGPT for a prompt to give me basically what I want and fed 2 images into it, let's say the static one and one of the new generated dynamic compositions. And this is what I got as output. I think really well done. It even invented, let's say, the charging. It added a logo here, but some things are just not right. I think from 8 pictures, 4 can actually be used. And then I did the same thing with the standard mode again. The images look cool. I like the details, right? I really like the color, but it invented new things as well, right? Here's the first time where the Pro mode really performed more accurately, and I think where I would prefer to use the Pro mode, even though it costs 3 times more. Or maybe do like a couple and then just take like 1 or 2 pieces per iteration. And then I want to place the whole thing in a context, like flagship maximum hero shot, premium environment, contemporary lifestyle, product remains primary focus, luxury consumer electronics advertising style. So I think it really did that well. It understood the context. This is an audio device, right? It created a completely new way of portraying these items, even though the cabling is not correct, but it looks super premium. There's audio in the back, coffee, leather notebook. So all in all, I think this is really well represented, also compared to the prompt. And then at the bottom, we have the example for the standard one. Here we have a watermark. It copied basically based on its training data, always a bad sign. Then it basically just copied the position and the original composition of one of the input images and just added the background. It's luxury, but it doesn't really add to the context, makes this more understandable. So I think this is another fail where I would definitely prefer the Pro mode. Right, and then I went on to ask it to basically show the earpieces in context worn by a person. So I asked again for a prompt, and these are the 2 results. The first one working well, even though the person looks a little bit too perfect and clean, obviously AI generated. I think it's better for this one, but here it fucked up the earpiece by itself, right? So it's hanging on the ear instead of actually going into the ear. But I like the perspective better, the lighting much better. And then we have the standard mode. And here it too completely invented a new feature. Again, I like the shot. It looks more realistic, not as much AI like the Pro mode. So overall, here I'm a little bit on the edge. I think I would have to do more fine-tuning with the prompt, but I feel like both of them can actually lead to interesting outputs and realism. And the last thing I did basically to round off my workflow would be to animate. And for the animation, we have 4 different modes, right? There is standard V2, standard, turbo V2, and turbo. So that's actually where we have the standard V2 included, not like in the modify. And here are the costs, right? So the cheapest one is standard version 2, 11 credits per second. Then we have standard 13 credits per second, turbo 40 credits per second, and turbo V2 80 credits per second. So this racks up quite dramatically over time. So you can only say 5 or 10 seconds. That's all the control you have in terms of duration. And then you have some indication about how the different models perform, right? So standard says strong prompt adherence, roughly takes 5 minutes to generate. Then we have standard V2, more control, presets, or end frames, roughly 1 minute. This confuses me, or end frames, because I also have end frames with the standard mode. Actually, with all modes, I have end and beginning frames, so I don't quite get it. Turbo V2 is high fidelity and fast exploration, 45 seconds, and turbo is simple motion for quick iterations, right? 1 minute. In terms of duration or speed, standard V2 is quite fast as turbo, just a little bit slower than turbo V2. If you look at the results, so this is the standard one, right? It works quite well. I asked it to do a rotation, slow cinematic camera push, gentle orbital movement around the subject, also natural movements from the person, subtle highlights traveling across the earphones to emphasize the materials and contours, right? It's not like keeping the earpiece in the focus, I feel like. It's drifting way too far to the left. The person is looking into the different direction, which I think is interesting because now the earpiece remains the focal point, so that is really well done. There's highlights flowing over the surface. So overall, I feel like this is really closely relating to my prompt adhering, right? So that's also what it says. And it's the cheapest of them. So I think there's definitely a choice to go for. And then I did the turbo one, which is really expensive, right? 40 compared to 11 credits per second. And it gave me this thing. So the first thing it does, it's cropping my input, and then it creates this laser beam advertising style, and that at the cost of 200 credits, right? I don't think at this stage, I feel like turbo is reasonable to use. I don't see why. So let me break down to you a little bit more of what that means in terms of overall credits, right? So we have In the pro mode, we get 20,000 credits per month. So that equals roughly 666 modifications in total, right? So if you were only to do modifications, you could do more than 666 in the pro mode. Or you could make 100 seconds with the turbo animation, which is crazy, right? Only 100 seconds and all credits would be gone. On the other hand, if you were to use 20,000 credits and only use the standard modifications, you would get roughly 2,500 modifications. So that's more than almost 4 times, right? Not as, but almost 4 times more modifications than you would get with the pro mode. That's crazy. And if you just use the standard V2 for animations, you can animate up to 30 minutes worth of time if you spend all your credits on just animating. So that's also quite a difference compared to the turbo mode, right? I looked at one of my sample projects to get a more realistic understanding, because in there I did 107 modifications, which also include color variations and some of the other features that are provided by Vizcom. So in total, it was 107 modifications, and I did 45 seconds worth of animations. And that was all with the pro mode. So in total, that cost me 3,705 credits, 3,200 of it just for modification, almost 500 for animation. So if I were to use this as a reference for my projects, you would be able to create 5 projects of similar volume in a single month before your credits run out. That's 1,351 credits if you were to use only the standard mode. You would be able to get almost 15 projects per month, but I also think that you would probably have to spend more modifications. So overall, maybe you get to achieve 10 projects per month. But after looking at it more in detail and in more depth, I feel like there are certain steps that are definitely worth doing with the standard mode. I should at least try, right? Do 3 iterations of standard before I go to the pro mode and see if there's actually a valid reason to use the pro mode to begin with. I felt like making the changes with applying logos and color changes that worked quite alright with the standard model. But when it came to creating new dynamic compositions, I would go for the pro mode. For doing, let's say, these collections of macro photography shots, I would go with the pro mode. And context, I would definitely go with the pro mode. Then for showing it with people, I think that I need to explore a little bit more. I feel like at the moment, both have legit results, or both of them are not exactly what I wanted them to be yet. So I would have to explore a little bit more. But for animation, there's no question to me at all that using standard V2 is the way to go, right? And I think with combining these things, we would be able to upgrade our project output per month to, let's say, 8, maybe even 9 or 10, if we combine them effectively. All right, that was it for me today. I hope now you have a better understanding of how to improve your workflow, how to use your credits maximum efficiently, and how to get more projects out in a single month than before. If you did, please like and subscribe to this work, follow for more, and see you around. Thank you. Bye-bye.